Our second panel is entitled Policy Response, Aligning Trade with Industrial Strategy. Aims to explore how trade and industrial policies can be effectively integrated to enhance the country's resilience and competitiveness. Joining us now for this important discussion are five highly accomplished experts. I'd like to call them to join me on stage. Calling first, Attorney Lucil Vicerra from SyCip, Gorres, Velayo, SGV. Hi, ma'am. Please join us on stage. Also, Attorney Victor de Dios, Principal at SyCip, Gorres, Velayo. He has over 18 years of expertise in indirect taxation, customs, and global trade. Please take a seat, any seat, ma'am. Also joining here, Mr. Cyrus, Paolo Buenafe, Division Chief for Knowledge Management at the Commission on Higher Education. Dr. Neil Adrian Cabiles, Assistant Secretary at the DOF Office of the Chief Economist as well. And last but not the least, we heard from her earlier, Ms. Bianca Sykimte, Director of the Export Market Bureau of DTI. All right, please have a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just get... Okay, so we're supposed to finish, since we're short on time now. We'll try to keep it tight. Not short, but tight. Now, I want to start with, maybe we hear from the DOF, Dr. Cabiles and maybe Bianca. From an outsider's perspective, when I read the news, to begin with, why did we put a 34% tariff on the US? Why did we? Because that's what they're saying. That is the tariff that we impose on US goods. That's what they use for the computation. So why?
The tariffs levied on US goods imported by the Philippines is actually the same for all countries where the Philippines does not have an FTA. So it's all the same for all countries. In fact, when we computed the trade-weighted average of basically the trade-weighted average of the applied tariffs from the US is just about 3%. If you if you compute for the weighted average. So it's actually kind of low already.
Okay, all right. And so now that Trump, seeing the number, just the headline number, obviously, is it so bad that he's decided to give you half of that, half of what you give them?
Well, basically, again, based on we tried to compute how Trump came up with the tariffs imposed on each country. Again, it's based on the level of trade deficit. Trade deficit that the US has with the Philippines. When we discount, for example, semiconductor or electronics trade, actually the US has a trade surplus with the Philippines. The Philippines is the 8th biggest market of US exports of agricultural products. We're we're a growing market for passenger vehicles. And so what we're saying to the US, it's worthy to sit down with the Philippines and negotiate an agreement that would allow us to mutually meet our objectives.
And just to set the record straight, where are we coming from? What was the original tariff on Philippine goods?
It would
before the 17. Would there be an average?
It varies. I'll have to check the data, but for example, again, for garments, it's quite high. Coconut, it's quite low, roughly less than 3%. Electronics, of course, with the information technology agreement is also relatively low. Most of it are zero already. So it would vary from industry to industry.
All right. I was actually tinkering around. There is a UPenn, Wharton actually has, and you can use this, they have a simulator. They can compute how much the US will make from the Philippines with the new tariffs. And I was looking at the numbers. You can check it out yourselves. From the Philippines for 10-year period, 2026 to 2035, with an import value of $158 billion, they were estimating that America would make or generate $14.9 billion for a 10-year period. in the new tariff regime. From Vietnam, for the same 10-year period, with an import value of $1.6 trillion, so mas malaki, they're looking to generate $274 billion in tariff revenues. From Malaysia, where the import value is times 3 of ours, $579 billion, they're looking to generate tariff revenues of $71.1 billion. We're at $15 billion. We are in the fringe. It feels like we are indeed small. So how do we tell America to sit down with us? When you talk to any businessman, sasabihin nila, liit nito. Let's not even bother. Let's lump them all together in a basket. So how do we convince them that you need to talk to us? We are not just the side story. We are important. Anyone from the panel?
We actually
Go ahead.
we were actually able to convince them to talk to us since we had the May 2 meeting with the USTR. In fact, other ASEAN countries were not able to secure a similar meeting. I think it was only Vietnam and Indonesia who was able to secure a meeting. The Philippines, without hesitation from the US side, as soon as we sent the letter requesting for a meeting, US immediately said yes to meeting the Philippines. The meeting was supposed to be less than an hour. It spanned for, it extended for a couple of minutes. So it was a very good and productive meeting.
What's the posturing from America? Were you in the meeting, Bianca? Yes, she was.
I was.
So why don't you tell us, what was the posturing of America in this meeting?
Signed an NDA.
An NDA. All right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, well, just to talk about the relevance for the Philippines, I mean, how you actually get them on board. This, just as a background, this really actually started as, it's not just really as simple as what they get out of trade. We went through the relations that we have with that of the United States. The strategic relations in the first place was a good opening for us in the sense that you did get an exemption on some of the military aid, so that was sort of a way to go in. And of course, you have the Luzon Economic Corridor that is still being pursued even with the current administration, while it was introduced by the previous administration. So this particular two things created a sort of an importance of the Philippines on the part of the United States, even if you consider that the trade volumes are not that large.
So Bianca, what was the posturing of America in the meeting? Ito na lang, does it look like the Philippines will get what it wants? You heard it here, guys. We're positive. All right. All right. And anyone else who would like to weigh in? Go ahead, ma'am.
Just
Attorney.
a quick comment, no. While in absolute value, Philippines is small, I think we can offer the potential that we have, no? So the kind of products that we are exporting, semicon, they're very important as well, no? So, and we can always tell the US government that the Philippines is already making changes in its laws, in its policies. So I hope that would, help us convince, the US to, consider as well our position as far as tariffs are concerned.
So Attorney Lucil, you started this earlier. You were talking about some ways where we can benefit, the first sale concept, the unbundling. Are there other things being put on the table? Because I understand you are consulting for government. You are
for companies.
For companies, yes. So what are some of the things on the table that you think will help us navigate through or maneuver through these challenges?
Okay, as I said, there are ways to minimize the impact, but I'd like to highlight, as commented as well a while ago, that this is not applicable to all. So there may
It's
be
not one size fits all.
yes, there may be some actions, that may be applied to some but not to all, But as I said, and this is in coordination with our EY offices, there are a number of programs, even duty drawback, no? Again, depending on the industry and certain restrictions that may be applied to the importations of the company. But what I'd like to highlight is we're not constrained just to accept whatever that tariff rate is. There are ways to minimize the impact.
All right. Attorney Victor, I wanted to ask you well, there are other trade agreements that we have. How do we leverage these other trade agreements and maybe exemptions?
I'm coming from the point of view that the Philippines is positioned as a high exemption market when it comes to the Trump tariffs, as mentioned in the study of Dr. Aldaba. So, given that situation, we can perhaps articulate globally that the Philippines is well positioned in terms of becoming a manufacturing or production site for a number of industries. And that aligns very much with the laws that we already have now. We've been hearing create and create more. These are laws that would cater to foreign investors that would like to set up shop in the Philippines, conduct their manufacturing activities here for exports, and in exchange of that, get incentives. So we could make use of those existing laws already as a starting point to really leverage on exemption. But the thing is, I think aside from the laws that we have, we also need to tap the executive to really iron out the details when it comes to the implementation of this law. And I think we've been seeing positive action both from the DOF and from DTI, because these are the offices that will be in charge of really providing or supplying the details to really make these sets of incentives attractive to the foreign market. If you go out and ask a foreign investor, what convinces you or what prevents you from investing in the Philippines? They would not say that it's the taxes or the incentives that we have. It's really the uncertainties that bothers them and maybe keeps them from actually investing. So if we could iron out those things, we have the law, we have the help of trade, we have the help of finance. Hopefully it sets out good for the Philippines.
When you talk to your clients, I wonder, Attorney Victor, where does the problem seem to lie? Is it in the national government level or the LGUs? And of course, the disconnect between the two when investors do business here.
Well, of course, I'm happy to sit with Neil and Bianca in this panel. But I would say, it's a pleasure for me to share what the community, the business
Go ahead.
community thinks about the
No.
situation. Going back to the uncertainties, no? Let's say if one company, let's keep it theoretical, if one company decides to invest thinking that it would enjoy certain incentives in accordance with what the law provides and what the implementing rules would show, that's a good thing. And investors actually come in for that. But oftentimes, say for example, when a company, that very same investor would experience, say for example, processes that are hard to go through or maneuver, or maybe tax audits that are hard to hurdle, customs audits, the same. Those challenges taken all together without singling out any of those factors could be a relevant consideration for them as well.
You're very diplomatic, Attorney Victor. We have heard of, the love letters from BIR. Alam mo na yan, you don't want to get a love letter from them. Or some would say when the fire department starts knocking and selling you their fire extinguisher, meron ka nang nabili bago, but it has to be from them. So I think it's but things I hope are moving in the right direction with ease of doing business, improving as well. But just to set the record straight, it's very abstract. What would you say Attorney Vic, is the percentage of your clients who decided to leave the Philippines or cancel an expansion because they were given a hard time? The numbers made sense, but the management did not. 10? Are you looking at 10%, 20?
Well, I'm happy to share that for the bigger companies that we assist,
Mhm.
none of them have actually left the country for reasons that I have cited. There are, of course, discussions that are happening, but our duty, I feel like our duty as well as tax and global trade advisors to them, is to explain to them that these are things that are necessary, and the best thing to actually do to hurdle all of these processes is to become compliant. Because no matter what, if you are compliant with the laws and the rules, you will be successful with those audits and all. But again, going back, happy to share that no one has actually left because of that. I did hear about other instances, maybe, of course, we're not part of those discussions, but resounding back to the reasons that I have just cited could be the reasons for leaving.
All right, all right. ASEC Neil Cabiles, Trump recently announced a tax on remittances.
Yeah.
Originally 5%, not as bad. 3.5, I think, is where he ended. Have you done the math? What will the impact be of that on our OFWs?
Yes, we actually have the estimates are actually still being done right now in terms of that. But we have to take note that a large part of our remittances, our remittances sources rather, are actually quite diversified. So you have remittances coming from the Middle East and also from Europe, which could be able to actually let's say not necessarily compensate, but would actually be able to balance perhaps the threat that this excise taxes on remittances in the US, if ever they do get implemented. However, what we are also looking at is on the policy perspective, the implementation of the excise tax is actually something that's administratively difficult to actually apply. There are actually ways wherein this could be, that this might be circumvented based on how you are seeing the way that the U.S. system in terms of remittances is set up. So we are looking at that perhaps the excise tax would happen something like in the case of the tariffs, that we would also have a certain 90-day pause or something like that. But that doesn't preclude us, of course, from looking at what would be the impact for those coming from the United States.
Because for all intents and purposes, our great export product really is our talent. What about the BPO sector? Will this complicate that industry?
Well, of course, it will have a certain impact on your BPO sector. Given that there are remittances really from the BPO sector coming
Correct.
in to that of the Philippines. So we are working together. We're actually doing consultations with ITBAC on this one into how the sector might be able to, how the industry might be able to prepare for this one should it really happen.
All right. Cyrus, hi. Why are you here?
You want the serious answer or the well,
Why do you think Ched
yeah.
has a seat in this
Okay.
table?
Yeah. Maybe I'll preface my answer by saying that whenever we consider some activity in an economic system, oftentimes education would always be thrown into that bag of interventions, right? So regardless whether this is the reciprocal tariff by the US or any other new stuff that we see, oftentimes you will see education, some bullet point there, okay, that needs to be done. Now, having said that, on the higher education space, or for that matter, the education sector as a whole, right, there are two considerations that we need to keep in mind, okay? Now, first of all, whenever we talk about interventions in the education sector, there's always going to be a long timeline wherein we'll have to wait a bit before we can actually realize the benefits of any intervention that's being done. For example, if you're looking at higher education to do something, you'll have to wait 4 years before you'll actually get some reward from that intervention. Now think about it. After 4 years, you'll probably have a different US president by then. So would the intervention that you've started to do 4 years ago, would it still be relevant now? Okay, so that's the first consideration when you put education sector in the mix, right? The second consideration is that you have to look at the incentive system of the learner, okay, for that matter. In the field, we often call that as the rate of return of education for the learner, right? Without going through the complicated stuff about it, whenever we try to put interventions in the education sector, it is not only the institutions that are going to be affected, we also have to think on the decision calculus of every learner. Now, this would be the young ones. In the case of higher education, we would be talking about ages 18 to 22. But this would also be affecting everybody else, perhaps those in the early 20s, late 20s, even late 30s even, right? So now, if you want to do demand-side interventions, you want to think what would incentivize these learners or these would-be learners to actually move into sectors that have been identified as strategic, as what Dr. Aldaba has mentioned in her paper, right? So now, okay, so those are the two considerations. And now I gravitate towards the main question that we have as to why, as to how the education sector would play out would be is our labor supply adequate? Because now, if you look at the education market and the labor market, they're connected, but they're actually still distinct, right? The thing there is that we look at the quantity. Okay, do we have enough people to take care of the strategic sectors that we want to look into? Okay, maybe we don't. If the answer is no, then we have to wait like what, 4 years, maybe 2 if you want to look at it. But that's for higher education. Now, what about the quality of labor? I mean, do we have the right talent to actually lead the sectors eventually? So now you'll be looking at another prolonged timeline. Now, I think well, not to wash our hands, and it's okay to be critical with the Commission on Higher Education. But if ever that we want to have a more robust response to whatever is happening outside, I feel or we feel that the technical vocational education space, okay, that's managed by TESDA, would be much better positioned to actually respond to what is happening right now as far as the reciprocal tariffs is concerned. Because now, when you look at the duration of how to upskill or reskill the talent that's needed to be employed in these strategic sectors, for tech voc, you only need around 12 months at most. So that's a faster response time compared to when you go through the traditional education sector. You're taking about 4 years. Maybe if you want to add 2 more years, 2 to 4 more years for graduate studies, it takes such a long time. Maybe that's to my last point here is that if ever education sector would be participating or contribute a lot to this matter, our role is really prophylactic in nature, right? We have to take a look at the whole economic system as a whole and then start identifying things that would really persist or be permanent for a long period of time. And only then we can make those necessary interventions in that space.
Cyrus, I want to add another layer to the question. Do you think we are graduating enough employable students, or are we graduating students with strong fundamentals?
Okay.
Beyond the numbers, talk to us about the
Okay, now beyond the numbers, before coming to the forum, I did some spot checks with our own data, right? So the answer to that question is that really depends on the sector, right? So certain
let's do engineers.
Okay, engineers, surprisingly, we're actually doing pretty well numbers wise. Okay, numbers wise. Quality wise, I think it's mixed. I've seen mixed signals. There are certain years that we have better quality than others. Okay, I think perhaps the biggest monkey wrench thrown into the system was the pandemic. So the quality sort of dipped. Like we've seen a lot of the academic institutions suffer a little bit In fact, there's a backlog of around 1.5 to 2 years in terms of quality. So you have that. No, but overall, from the previous years, I think we've been doing well. Numbers wise, we're doing well. Quality wise, it's mixed. Some sectors are doing well, some are not. Engineering, I think, is okay. But yeah, I mean, to that point, the answer is
We're okay,
yeah, we're okay.
but we can't be just okay.
Correct.
in
I mean,
unusual-
we shouldn't feel complacent.
because
Yeah.
we're not even in ground zero.
Correct.
We are a step below. 7 years ago, there was a study that showed the Philippines, with over 100 million strong population, produced 50,000 engineers. 50. That's from sanitary engineer, civil engineer, mechanical. 50,000. Half would go on to pass the board, become certified. Vietnam, 2 years before that, their numbers were showing they produce, and their population is much smaller than ours, they produce twice as many engineers. And we wonder why people are flocking to Vietnam. Tim Cook, and you can easily search this if Apple said, why are we in China? He said, there's a confusion. You think we're in China for low cost? China stopped being low cost many years ago. We go to China because you go to any place and you say, if you're an engineer, raise your hand. You can fill football fields of engineers. In America, you can just fill one room. So it's all about the talent. So here's my forward question, Cyrus. I think your seat is very important here. What is your intervention today, a specific intervention today that you think will pay off significantly, that we will feel 4 years from now? One concrete intervention.
Let me check if I am authorized to disclose certain things. One specific intervention that can improve the quality of the output of our graduates, if you will, the quality of our graduates. Back then, one of the strategic initiatives of the commission is internationalization. That's one. So we're now collaborating with a lot of institutions outside, more with the Philippines. You're seeing a lot of the efforts from the commissioners really coordinating with the other ministries abroad to actually get higher talent also through internationalization. That's one. Of course, there are the usual monetary side to things, like putting in grants for research, right? And this is not only for CHED, but we have to collaborate also with other agencies like DOST for the science and technology space. We have to collaborate also with other boards in PRC to identify those professionals that really need those elevated levels of quality, right? Yeah, I mean, those are the things that I can shuffle through my memory right now.
All right.
That we're doing. Yeah.
But you're going to have to remove Harvard from the partnerships for now, right? Because
because of the foreign students, right?
that's 3 to 4
Yeah.
years. All right.
Harvard is one out of many, I think. And if you've taken a look at the education space globally, we're starting to see a very diverse landscape.
I heard, at least for Xavier School, what they're doing, what the parents are doing is they don't have their kids finish in Xavier School, then go to Harvard. What they do is from Xavier School, grade school, Xavier School, high school, they go to British School of Manila, mga international schools, and then the next is Hong Kong. They're saying a lot of these students are going to Hong Kong. So I guess my trend, they're seeing some bright spot there. Just very quickly, I think we're ready to open the floor to questions from the audience members. If you have burning questions, comments so far, we're halfway through. If you have questions on policy, what the government can do on the national level, local level, what they've done right so far, what else needs to be done, where they need to direct their attention. Do we have takers? We have a few minutes for questions. How about from the online community? We do. All right, sorry. They do, they message the questions here. So let me try to, sorry. Here, from Zoom. This is from Joseph Solis of PSA. Should the Philippines pursue a perpetual reinstatement of parity rights through constitutional amendment, extending beyond tariff exemptions and American entities to include allied countries. Who would like to take that? Repeat, okay. Should the Philippines pursue a perpetual reinstatement of parity rights through constitutional amendment, extending beyond tariff exemptions in American entities to include allied countries? All right. Bianca.
I think constitutional route is always the more difficult route, and there's an urgent need from our sector to already address. So the best way is to negotiate an agreement with the US now, because otherwise we cannot wait for our industries.
How many FTAs are we negotiating as we speak?
We are negotiating with UAE, EU, and ASEAN Canada. That's what I recall.
Is a US-Philippine FTA on the table?
If US will agree, of course, we are happy to do it.
Alright.
It's also part of our request to the US to go bilateral FTA.
All right, so wait and see. We have another question here from one of our participants online. This is from Precious Love of NCCA. Why does the Philippines persist in anchoring its policies in Western frameworks despite their misalignment with our nation's unique realities? Can the country genuinely prioritize what is best for Filipinos, or does the shadow of colonial influence still shape our path? Malalim yun. Parang Miss Universe question. Who would like to take that? Okay, nagtuturoan. Ma'am, Attorney Lucil. Okay, si Miss Kim muna, and then the ladies. Go ahead, Miss Kim.
I would say our interest to negotiate an agreement with the US is part of our national interest. As you've seen, 15% of what we export to the world goes to the US, and if that decreases to a significant level, jobs will be affected. So I guess the answer is it's also to our national interest to negotiate an agreement with the US.
All right. Attorney Lucil?
Of course, we consider the reality. So, as I have been always taught, ibaba natin sa lupa yung nasa langit. No? Look at the details. Look at what is applicable to us. So that because our best interest will be best served if, we look at the reality. What's happening on the ground. Yeah.
All right. Clearly Trump's policies are very consequential for prices, consequential for employment, consequential for foreign relations. So this is
Can I add one? It has been long said by DTI that industrial policy drives trade policy. So whenever we do trade negotiations, we consult industries, both exporters and importers. In fact, before we went to the US, we had, I think, 2 late-night meetings. We were surprised. We called for a late-night meeting at 10 in the evening, twice, and there are 100 companies that showed up. So that's how important this is for our industry.
And now the conversation is not just among companies, but Philippines Inc., Vietnam Inc., Thailand Inc., dealing with Trump Inc. So I wonder, what is the risk? Since everyone's saying we can be the net benefactor of Trump 2.0, we heard it from the first panel. What is the risk of us alienating our other trade partners? We tried to please America so much to get this deal. And here's Vietnam saying, part of the ASEAN bloc, you're giving it so much away. And, you cannot fight with your neighbors so close to us. So any thoughts on this? How complicated this relationship is? If people think of us as disproportionately benefiting from the US tariffs, what are the chances that we see this backfire from China, from Vietnam, from Thailand? Your thoughts on this?
Let's start na lang.
Go ahead.
I think any action that we're going to take in connection with the Trump tariff, we should consider the actions of our neighboring countries, because it's possible that, for example, we are going to accept no investments here, but it's also possible that Trump again in the future would change certain policies and rules that might, disadvantage our position as far as tariff is concerned. No, so my view is it should not be a single approach that we should be using, but again, consider as well the actions that will be taken by our neighboring countries and align that to the extent possible that would benefit not just the Philippines, but ASEAN as a whole.
Just playing devil's advocate, medyo game theory to Is it smart for us to be negotiating with the rest of the ASEAN bloc with America? I mean, we stand to gain from this eh. Why would we want Vietnam na mababa pa yung kanya? So what's an interesting way to look at it? Sir Sinan, I think sir, he's raising his hand. Maybe thoughts on this? If I were Philippines Inc., I'm like,
just a
no.
comment.
Go ahead.
We already have RCEP.
There, okay, we have
RCEP
other,
already.
okay.
What we have to watch out for is because the other ASEAN countries are also impacted, right? So we have a free trade agreement.
Correct.
Okay? So 0-0 yan. So yung fear mo na ang China papasok sa Philippines, andyan. Yung fear mo na ang Vietnam will divert to the Philippines, andyan yan. Yung fear mo na yung Thailand papasok sa Philippines, andyan yan. So anong kailangan natin? Kailangan natin gamitin ng Pilipinas yung RCEP for our own offensive interests and make sure that we are not left behind insofar as RCEP is concerned. I mean, I think dapat alagaan natin yun.
Two things. Hindi lang pala Amerika ang dapat katakutan. We should watch all the players. And second thing, sir, how exactly do you suggest we leverage RCEP as offensive strategy?
Well, US is what? 15% of our exports. ASEAN is not far behind. Ilang percent tayo ngayon? More than 20. Okay. So all of these things we really have to realign. And remember, this is more long-term. FTA is rules-based. There is a time frame. Trumponomics is what, 4 years or whatever, kung saan siya. So we have to look longer term. We have to look longer term. You're right. We might be paying too much attention to the US. Of course, it's also substantive, but we have to be realistic about it, no? Ano talaga siya? Kung gusto niyang sectoral, kailangan natin pag-aralan anong sector ang itatapat natin sa kanya. But RCEP is already there. It's rules-based. The uncertainty with America is answered for by the certainty of a rules-based trade regime, for example, in RCEP and the other FTAs that we have.
All right. All right. Any more comments from our... yes, we do have, ma'am. Sir, from the back. Please identify yourself and direct your question.
Hello po, I am Patrick Rabi from the Academy, from PUP. My question is, I have a question in regards to the nature of these tariffs. Do we anticipate these tariffs to be of permanent nature? This is especially considering the fact that Trump is full of surprises, as is with the Liberation Day announcement, but he can also be capricious. I mean, these tariffs can change in 6 months from now. And this is also in consideration of the policy recommendations in regards to leveraging these tariffs. I mean, these are not implementable short term. They will only be effective long term. And so that in mind, what if, let's say, we are already implementing the policies to leverage these tariffs, then 9 months in, the US decided to change its mind and reverse these tariffs. Further, let us also consider that since these tariffs are limited on goods, should we focus or develop further our capacity on exporting goods or should we also focus on services since these are left untaxed, and isn't focusing more on services more certain, considering that again, we have no certainty in regards to what is the nature or how long would these tariffs last. Thank you.
All right. Who would like to take that? Miss Bianca.
I don't think anyone knows what Trump will think in the next few days.
In the next few minutes.
But I guess the best we can do again under the Philippine Export Development Plan for 2023-2028, we really emphasize that it's a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And we cannot basically predict everything that will happen in the global trade environment. What's crucial is for us to, again, support local industries, to industrialize, and to provide firm level support, meaning we have to empower individual firms to be able to compete internationally. So I think that's the focus of the DTI and the whole exporting community.
Actually, I'm trying to load. May bagong balita na naman about Trump. But what's new? That is only expected. I think we have to wrap up. So one final question. So our goal here is to come up with actionable recommendations na pwede nating isubmit as proposals. So hypothetically, there is a proposal for the Philippines to form a trade industrial transformation council to respond to evolving trade pressures. Okay? So the 5 members here will have their hand in creating that council. Based on your expertise, where you're coming from, how should that council look like? Again, it's a trade industrial transformation council to help the country respond very agile to evolving trade pressures. Number 1, firing squad na lang. Attorney Victor, who should lead that council?
Well, first of all, I think it should be composed of both the government and the private sector.
All right.
Okay? And
So
within the
public-private.
private sector, there should be various industries,
Represented.
even to the extent of involving advice.
Parang PISAC. Senior Advisor Council of the
Something
President.
like that. Because my imagination is that this situation that we have is very fluid. It's not a linear 17% over 10 years, because time and time again, we are going to think of solutions like negotiation, diba? Relocation, attracting more investments. But if
So
we
many
are
moving parts.
successful in doing that, doesn't that allow the US or Mr. Trump to just adjust the tariffs, and it will change the whole ball game altogether? So I think there should be a body, as nicely pointed out in the paper by by Dr. Adaba, that there should be a body that is capable of being quickly formed, composed of the government, private sector, advisors, to look at these issues on a regular basis, because these issues are going to keep changing. So these members of the council should be there to quickly respond.
Members does this council have?
I really don't know, but it can be an evolving
All right.
type of composition.
Ms. Kim, who should head this council?
Of course, my bias would be the
DTI. All right, go ahead.
that there are already several councils that were established. For example, Export Development Council, now the Tatak Pinoy Council. I think what's more crucial is to ensure that this council, whether that council or councils, is empowered to act on doing this.
Maybe that's the problem, Ms. Kim. There are so many councils.
And the necessary resources to implement.
Cyrus seems to agree. Go ahead, your thoughts, Cyrus.
When
this-
you pose that question, the bubble that came to my mind, another council, for somebody like me who attends gazillions of interagency committees and meetings and all that, I want to challenge the assumption of the question. I mean, what's the problem that this Trade Industry Transformation Council is supposed to solve?
Maybe it should be the super council.
Yeah. Okay, now,
Everybody else, wala na. Just
Alright,
one
so-
council.
that was the first thing that came to mind. That's a very unfiltered comment, right? But to that point, okay, now I'd like to have faith in the existing bureaucracy that we have. I think it's just a matter of getting things done really well, right? Not to mention that with the talent that we have already in government, it's quite limited, no? So um, I think we just have to do things really well. Now, to the question regarding who's going to head it, yeah, I have no opinion about that. I don't want to get canceled. Okay, so I'm probably not gonna say anything, but what I'm sure it's not Chin. So that I think that we're sure about it.
No, you never know.
Please, no, wag na. Too many interagency meetings.
How about ASEC? How much budget should this council get?
Well, actually, I'll begin first with a very frank opinion about councils. The problem with councils is unfortunately they sometimes end up as talk shops.
Oh.
That's the problem. So I think if we are perceiving or we're looking at the council, I think what's important is we should first look at if there are overlapping duties or responsibilities of various councils already, and how we will be able to actually merge this and be able to create what really is the clear work plan of a council. Because I think we've had a lot of councils, and oftentimes people get distracted on the issues that they're supposed to discuss. So if we want a council, let's first define what that council wants, what that council has to do, what duties and responsibilities there is of this particular council, and how it actually creates a certain value add before we actually proceed to that. Now, to answer on the question on the budget, I don't have much of an idea of what the budget is really for this one, because we don't know what the scope of the council is yet. We don't know what the membership is composed of yet. But if there is anything about having to do with this council, I think the good direction would be this would be a council that would actually have really this holistic way or holistic view of actually supporting our export sector. That, for example, your foreign policy, your trade policy is actually very much supported with, for example, fiscal policy itself. Like you have very good laws in terms of tariffs and everything else, and of course you have create more, but there's a need for the infrastructure and other support facilities. And I think that's what the role of that council would be.
All right. As the council is slowly taking shape, more questions than answers. Attorney Lucil, what do you hope is the first order of business for this council?
I hope, no, first and foremost, I agree to have that council, and we can leverage and take advantage of the presence of the many councils that we have right now. So maybe, take members from those councils, and the first order of the day is to come up with a concrete plan on how we would take advantage of the opportunities that we have under this Trump tariff and to address risk and concerns.
All right. Tall order. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause, please, for our panel number 2. Attorney Lucil, ASEC, Cyrus, Ms. Kim, and Attorney Victor.